Kang Tae-ho wiped the sweat from his dirty face as he crawled through the narrow tunnel deep inside planet Nexus 7. The air was hot and thick and made it hard to breathe. His 17-year-old body was thin from years of eating nothing but protein, paste, and stale water. His hands were covered in cuts and scars from handling the sharp crystal rocks that the alien overlords demanded he mine every single day. The tunnel stretched ahead of him like the throat of some giant monster. Purple lights from his helmet cast strange shadows on the rocky walls. Behind him, he could hear other human workers coughing and groaning as they dug deeper into the planet looking for the precious blue crystals that powered Federation starships. These crystals were worth more than human lives, according to their alien masters. Tae-ho had been working in these tunnels since he was 12 years old. His father, Park Jae-sung, had worked here before him and died when a tunnel collapsed on his 43rd birthday. His mother, Kim Soo-jin, worked in the food processing center 16 hours every day, making the terrible paste they called dinner. His younger sister, Lee Na-young, sorted crystal fragments with her bare hands until her fingers bled every night. This was life for humans on Nexus 7. This was life for humans everywhere in the galaxy under Federation rule. They were slaves in everything but name, and everyone knew it. The Federation claimed they were protecting human colonies from dangerous alien species. They said humans needed their guidance because humans were weak and stupid and would destroy themselves without proper supervision. But Tae-ho knew the truth. The Federation kept humans as workers because humans could survive in places other species could not. Humans could work longer hours with less food. Humans could adapt to terrible conditions that would kill most other creatures in the galaxy. Today felt different, though. Tae-ho could not explain why, but something in his chest felt tight and angry. Maybe it was because yesterday he watched Commander Vex 9 beat an old human woman for walking too slowly. Maybe it was because his sister came home with fresh bruises on her arms from the sorting facility supervisor. Maybe it was because he was tired of being afraid every single moment of every single day. He reached a small chamber where the blue crystals grew from the walls like frozen lightning. These crystals pulsed with energy and hummed quietly in the darkness. Tae-ho carefully began chipping them away from the rock using his worn tools. Each crystal had to be perfect, or the aliens would punish the entire work crew. He had seen humans beaten unconscious for bringing back crystals with tiny cracks. The container beside him slowly filled with the glowing blue stones. Each one represented hours of dangerous work, crawling through unstable tunnels that could collapse at any moment. The Federation did not care if humans died in cave-ins. There were always more humans to replace the dead ones. Tae-ho was reaching for a particularly large crystal when he heard heavy footsteps echoing down the main tunnel. His blood turned cold. Those were not human footsteps. Those were the metal boots of Federation guards making their inspection rounds. He worked faster, trying to fill his container before they reached his section. The footsteps got closer and louder. Tae-ho could hear the electric hum of shock weapons and the mechanical breathing filters that the reptilian soldiers wore. Commander Vex 9 was leading the patrol. Tae-ho recognized his distinctive heavy walk and the way he dragged his claws against the tunnel walls to intimidate the human workers. In his rush to finish before the guards arrived, Tae-ho made a terrible mistake. His tired hands slipped, and the container of precious blue crystals tipped over. The crystals scattered across the rocky floor, making musical chiming sounds as they bounced and rolled into cracks and crevices. Time seemed to stop. Tae-ho stared at the scattered crystals, knowing his life had just changed forever. Losing crystals was one of the worst crimes a human worker could commit. The punishment was usually death, or something worse than death. The footsteps stopped right outside his chamber. Commander Vex 9 appeared in the entrance, blocking out most of the light. The alien was enormous, even for his species, standing nearly 3 meters tall. His scales were dark green with silver edges that gleamed like knife blades. His yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, like the headlights of a ground transport. long, claws extended from his fingers capable of tearing through metal and stone. Behind him stood 3 other Federation soldiers, all carrying plasma rifles and shock batons. Their reptilian faces showed no emotion as they looked at the scattered crystals on the ground. To them, Tai-Ho was not a person. He was just another piece of equipment that had stopped working properly. Commander Vex 9 stepped into the chamber, making the ground shake under his weight. His massive head turned slowly as he surveyed the scene. The silence stretched on and on until Tai-Ho felt like screaming just to break the terrible tension. When the commander finally spoke, his voice was like grinding rocks. Each word came out slow and deliberate and full of barely controlled rage. The translator device on his chest turned his alien words into human language, but could not hide the menace behind them. "You stupid, worthless human," he said in a voice that made the tunnel walls vibrate. "You have cost the Federation valuable resources. Do you understand what you have done? Do you understand how much these crystals are worth?" Tai-Ho tried to speak, but his voice came out as barely a whisper. "I am sorry, Commander," he managed to say. "It was an accident. I can gather them up. I can fix this." Vex 9 laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. It was like the sound metal makes when it breaks. "An accident," he repeated. "You think this is an accident? You think your clumsiness means nothing." The commander stepped closer until his massive form blocked out all the light. Tai-Ho could smell the alien scent like burning copper and ozone. He could see every detail of the creature's terrifying face. The rows of sharp teeth, the cold, calculating intelligence behind those glowing eyes, the complete lack of anything resembling mercy or compassion. Perhaps the commander said slowly, "Perhaps watching you die will teach the other humans to be more careful. Perhaps your death will remind them that they exist only to serve the Federation." Tai-Ho felt terror flood through his body like ice water. He wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. The tunnel was too narrow and the other soldiers blocked the only exit. He wanted to fight, but what could a 17-year-old human boy do against creatures who could tear apart steel with their bare hands? Before Tai-Ho could move or speak or even breathe, Commander Vex 9 struck him across the face with the back of his massive hand. The blow lifted Tai-Ho completely off his feet and sent him flying across the chamber. He crashed into the rocky wall and fell to the ground, tasting blood in his mouth. His vision blurred and his ears rang from the impact. The other soldiers moved, closer, forming a circle around the fallen human. They had done this many times before. They knew exactly how to kill a human worker in a way that would terrify the others without damaging too much Federation property in the process. "Commander." Vex 9 walked over to where Tai-Ho lay gasping on the ground. The alien reached down and grabbed the boy by the throat, lifting him into the air like he weighed nothing at all. Tai-Ho felt the creature's claws pressing against his neck, drawing small drops of blood. "This is what happens to humans who waste." Federation Resources Vex 9 announced loudly so that other workers in nearby tunnels could hear. "This is what happens to species who forget their place in the galaxy." But something strange was happening inside Tai-Ho's chest. As the alien creature's grip tightened around his throat, cutting off his air, something deep inside him began to burn. It was not just anger, though anger was part of it. It was something older and more dangerous than simple rage. It was the fury of a species that had been pushed too far for too long. The other soldiers did not notice anything different at first. They were too busy enjoying the spectacle of another human being killed for their amusement. Commander Vex 9 was too focused on his speech about Federation superiority to pay attention to the changes happening in his victim. None of them realized that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. They were about to learn what happened when you cornered a human being and left them with nothing left to lose. The burning feeling in Tai-Ho's chest spread through his body like liquid fire. His vision started to change, and everything around him became sharper and clearer than it had ever been before. He could see every scale on Commander Vex 9's face. He could hear the heartbeats of all 4 alien soldiers. He could smell their fear even though they did not know they were afraid yet. Something was happening to his muscles. They felt different, stronger. Like steel cables were replacing his weak human flesh. His bones felt denser and harder. His reflexes became lightning fast. The pain from the commander's grip around his throat faded away as if it was happening to someone else. Commander Vex 9 noticed the change first. The human boy in his grasp was no longer struggling weakly. Instead, Taeho was looking directly into his yellow eyes without fear. The alien had seen that look before in the eyes of Apex, predators on dangerous worlds. It was the look of something that no longer saw itself as prey. "What is happening to you?" the commander demanded, but his voice carried worry now instead of confidence. "Human muscles do not work that way. Human bones are supposed to break easily." Taeho smiled, and it was not the smile of a scared boy anymore. It was the smile of something that had just discovered it was much more dangerous than anyone had realized. The smile of a creature that had been pretending to be harmless for far too long. "You made one mistake," he said, and his voice was different now, deeper and calmer and filled with a terrible certainty. "You assumed that because we looked weak, we actually were weak. You never asked what would happen if you pushed us too far." The other Federation soldiers started reaching for their weapons, but their movement seemed slow and clumsy compared to what was happening inside Taeho's mind. He could see exactly where they would move before they moved. He could predict their actions like he was reading their thoughts. Commander Vex 9 tried to tighten his grip around Taeho's throat, but discovered that the human boy's neck was no longer soft flesh and fragile bone. It felt like he was trying to crush a piece of solid metal. His claws that could tear through steel plating could not even scratch the human skin. "This is impossible," Vex 9 hissed. "Our scientists have studied your species for centuries. Humans are physically inferior to every other sentient race in the galaxy. You have no natural weapons, no protective armor, no enhanced strength or speed." Taeho reached up and grabbed the commander's wrist with his left hand. The sound of breaking bones echoed through the tunnel as the alien's supposedly unbreakable scales cracked under pressure that should not have been possible for a human to generate. Vex 9's eyes widened in shock and pain as he realized his grip was being broken by someone a third of his size. "That was your second mistake," Taeho continued as if nothing unusual was happening. "You studied our bodies, but you never studied our minds. You never asked what happens when a human decides they would rather die fighting than live as a slave." The transformation was accelerating now. Taeho could feel his entire skeletal structure becoming denser and stronger. His muscles were growing, but not in a way that made him look different from the outside. Instead, they were becoming more efficient. Every fiber was being rebuilt into something that could generate impossible amounts of force. His nervous system was changing too. Electrical signals were moving faster through his brain and spine. His reaction times were dropping from human normal to something that belonged in the realm of advanced machinery. His senses were becoming so acute that he could hear conversations happening in tunnels hundreds of meters away. Most importantly, his mind was becoming clearer than it had ever been. All the fear and doubt and self-hatred that the Federation had beaten into him over the years was burning away like fog in sunlight. For the first time in his life, he could see himself as he truly was. Not a weak human slave, but a member of the most dangerous species the galaxy had ever produced. Commander Vex 9 tried to pull his shattered wrist free, but Taeho's grip was like a mechanical vice. The alien commander who had terrorized humans for decades was suddenly finding himself completely helpless in the hands of a 17-year-old boy. The three other soldiers finally managed to draw their weapons. Plasma rifles hummed to life and shock batons crackled with electrical energy. But they hesitated to fire because their commander was too close to the target. That moment of hesitation was all Taeho needed. He released Vex 9's wrist and moved faster than any of them could track. 1 second, he was standing in the alien's grasp. The next second, he was beside the nearest soldier. His hand closed around the plasma rifle barrel and crushed it like it was made of soft clay. The soldier tried to swing his shock baton, but Tae-ho was already behind him. A simple push sent the armored alien flying into the tunnel wall with enough force to crack the stone. The creature slid to the ground unconscious or dead. Tae-ho did not particularly care which. The second soldier opened fire with his plasma rifle. The superheated energy beam that should have vaporized a human struck Tae-ho in the chest and simply dispersed harmlessly. His skin had become something that could absorb and redirect energy weapons. Another gift from whatever was changing, his body at the cellular level. Tae-ho walked toward the second soldier as calmly as if he was taking a stroll through a garden. The alien kept firing panic, making his aim wild and desperate. Every shot either missed completely or struck Tae-ho without causing any damage at all. When he reached the soldier, Tae-ho simply took the weapon away from him. The alien's grip was strong enough to bend steel, but Tae-ho's fingers pried the rifle loose like he was taking a toy from a small child. He tossed the weapon aside and grabbed the soldier by his helmet. The third soldier was already running toward the tunnel exit, screaming into his communicator about emergency threats and requesting immediate backup. Tae-ho let him go. Soon everyone in the Federation would know what had happened here. Soon they would all understand that the age of human slavery was coming to an end. Commander Vex 9 was backing away, holding his shattered wrist against his chest. For the first time in his military career, he was afraid. Not just concerned or cautious, but truly terrified. The human boy was looking at him the way a hunter looks at wounded prey. "You wanted to kill me to teach the other humans a lesson," Tae-ho said as he slowly advanced on the retreating commander. "Let me teach you something instead. Let me show you. What happens when you make enemies of a species that has nothing left to lose?" The tunnel around them began filling with the sound of approaching footsteps. Human workers were abandoning their posts to see what was happening. Word was spreading through the mining complex that something impossible was occurring in Section 7. They arrived just in time to see their 17-year-old fellow slave grab the most feared Federation commander on the planet by the throat and lift him into the air with one hand. Just in time to see Tae-ho's eyes burning with a fire that had never existed in human history but had always been waiting for the right moment to ignite. The awakening was complete. The first human had discovered what his species was truly capable of when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. And Commander Vex 9 was about to become the first alien in galactic history to experience the full fury of awakened humanity. Time moved differently for Tae-ho now. His enhanced nervous system allowed him to process information so quickly that the world around him seemed to slow down like thick liquid. He could see every detail of Commander Vex 9's terrified expression. Every scale on the alien's face was crystal clear. Every drop of alien sweat was visible as it formed and fell. The human workers who had gathered in the tunnel entrance were frozen like statues. Their mouths hung open in shock as they watched their fellow slave holding the massive Federation commander in the air with one hand. Some of them had worked alongside Tae-ho for years. They had seen him struggle to lift heavy crystal containers. Now he was treating a 3-meter-tall reptilian warrior like a child's toy. Commander Vex 9's claws scraped uselessly against Tae-ho's arm, trying to break free from the impossible grip. His yellow eyes were wide with panic as he realized that his superior strength meant nothing against whatever the human had become. His feet kicked desperately in the air, but found no purchase. "Please," Vex 9 gasped in his native language before. His translator converted the words. The great Federation commander who had never shown mercy to any human was now begging for his life. "You do not understand what you are doing. Killing me will bring the entire fleet to this world. They will destroy everything." Tae-ho tilted his head slightly, like he was considering the alien's words. His grip remained steady as steel. Around them, the tunnel had become completely silent, except for the sound of labored breathing and the quiet hum of abandoned mining equipment. "You are right," he said finally. Killing you will bring consequences. The Federation will send more ships and more soldiers. They will try to punish humanity for what I am about to do. Hope flickered in the commander's reptilian features. Perhaps the human could still be reasoned with. Perhaps survival instincts would overcome whatever madness had possessed him. But then Tejo smiled again, and the hope died in Vex 9 eyes. Good, he continued. I want them to come. I want them to see what happens when they underestimate us. I want them to learn that humans are not prey animals anymore. What happened next would be analyzed by Federation scientists for years to come. They would study the security footage frame by frame, trying to understand how a human teenager could generate enough force to accomplish what Tejo did in those 2 seconds. The first second began with Tejo drawing back his free hand and forming it into a fist. The movement was smooth and controlled without any wasted motion. His enhanced muscles coiled like springs, storing enormous amounts of kinetic energy. Every fiber in his arm aligned perfectly to deliver maximum impact. Commander. Vex 9 saw the punch coming, but his alien reflexes were far too slow to react. The fist struck his helmet at the exact center, creating a sound like a meteor hitting stone. The helmet was made from compressed titanium alloy and could supposedly withstand direct hits from plasma cannons. It cracked down the middle like an eggshell. The impact sent shockwaves through the commander's skull and into his brain. His enhanced reptilian physiology that made him stronger and tougher than most species in the galaxy meant nothing against the focused fury of awakened humanity. Bones that had never been broken began to splinter. Organs that had survived battles on a dozen worlds started to shut down. The first second ended with Vex 9 helmet falling away in pieces, revealing his scaled head underneath. Blood the color of dark copper began trickling from his nostrils and the corners of his mouth. His eyes lost focus as his brain struggled to process the damage it had just received. The second began immediately. Tejo did not hesitate or pause to admire his work. His follow-up strike was already in motion before the pieces of helmet hit the ground. This time he aimed for the exposed skull beneath, using the same devastating precision that had destroyed the alien's protective gear. The watching humans saw Tejo's fist disappear completely into Commander Vex 9's head. There was no resistance at all. The skull that could supposedly withstand plasma fire crumpled like wet paper. The brain inside was crushed, instantly ending the life of one of the Federation's most feared military commanders. The second ended with Vex 9's body going completely limp in Tejo's grasp. The alien who had terrorized humans for decades was dead before the sound of the impact finished echoing through the tunnel. His yellow eyes stared sightlessly at nothing as dark blood pooled beneath his shattered skull. Tejo released the body and let it fall to the rocky floor with a wet thud. He stood over the corpse, breathing steadily, while alien blood dripped from his knuckles. The transformation was still coursing through his system, making him feel more alive than he had ever imagined possible. Complete silence filled the mining complex. Every human worker stared at the scene, trying to process what they had just witnessed. Some of them had been slaves for so long that they had forgotten humans could fight back. Others had dreamed of rebellion but never believed it was possible. Now they were seeing proof that the Federation was not invincible. Park Jun-ho was the first to speak. He was an older man who had worked in the tunnels for 20 years and had watched his own son die in a cave-in caused by Federation negligence. His voice shook as he pointed at the dead commander. "You killed him," he whispered. "You actually killed one of them." Tejo turned to face his fellow humans, and they could see that his eyes were still burning with that strange inner fire. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that none of them had heard from a human before. It was the voice of someone who was no longer afraid of anything the galaxy could throw at him. "Yes, I killed him," he said simply, "and I will kill any other Federation soldier who tries to harm us. The age of human slavery is over." Some of the workers began crying. Others started laughing with relief and joy. A few fell to their knees, overwhelmed by emotions they had not felt in years. For the first time since the Federation had conquered their worlds, humans were seeing one of their oppressors lying dead at their feet. But their celebration was interrupted by the sound of alarm sirens echoing through the complex. The third soldier, who had escaped, was spreading word of what had happened. Soon the tunnels would be filled with Federation troops seeking revenge for their fallen commander. Taeho heard the sirens but showed no sign of concern. Instead, he walked over to where Commander Vex 9 plasma rifle lay abandoned on the ground. He picked up the weapon and examined it like he had been using such technology his entire life. "They will come for us now," he announced to the gathered humans. "They will bring everything they have to try to put us back in chains. Are you ready to show them that we will never be slaves again?" The response came from dozens of throats at once. Voices that had been kept quiet by fear for so long suddenly roared with defiance that shook dust from the tunnel ceiling. For the first time in generations, humans were ready to fight for their freedom, and leading them was a 17-year-old boy who had just proven that when pushed too far, humans could become the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. Part 3. 2 seconds of devastation time moved differently for Taeho now. His enhanced nervous system allowed him to process information so quickly that the world around him seemed to slow down like thick liquid. He could see every detail of Commander Vex 9's terrified expression. Every scale on the alien's face was crystal clear. Every drop of alien sweat was visible as it formed and fell. The human workers who had gathered in the tunnel entrance were frozen like statues. Their mouths hung open in shock as they watched their fellow slave holding the massive Federation. Commander in the air with one hand. Some of them had worked alongside Taeho for years. They had seen him struggle to lift heavy crystal containers. Now he was treating a 3-meter-tall reptilian warrior like a child's toy. Commander Vex 9 claws scraped uselessly against Taeho's arm, trying to break free from the impossible grip. His yellow eyes were wide with panic as he realized that his superior strength meant nothing against whatever the human had become. His feet kicked desperately in the air but found no purchase. "Please," Vex 9 gasped in his native language before his translator converted the words. The great Federation commander who had never shown mercy to any human was now begging for his life. "You do not understand what you are doing. Killing me will bring the entire fleet to this world. They will destroy everything." Taeho tilted his head slightly like he was considering the alien's words. His grip remained steady as steel. Around them, the tunnel had become completely silent except for the sound of labored breathing and the quiet hum of abandoned mining equipment. "You are right," he said finally. "Killing you will bring consequences. The Federation will send more ships and more soldiers. They will try to punish humanity for what I am about to do." Hope flickered in the commander's reptilian features. Perhaps the human could still be reasoned with. Perhaps survival instincts would overcome whatever madness had possessed him. But then Taeho smiled again, and the hope died in Vex 9's eyes. "Good," he continued. "I want them to come. I want them to see what happens when they underestimate us. I want them to learn that humans are not prey animals anymore. What happened next would be analyzed by Federation scientists for years to come. They would study the security footage frame by frame, trying to understand how a human teenager could generate enough force to accomplish what Taeho did in those 2 seconds. The first second. News traveled fast between human colonies, even under Federation surveillance. Within hours of Commander Vex 9's death, every human settlement within 50 light years had heard whispered versions of the story. A teenage boy had killed a Federation commander with his bare hands. The impossible had become possible, and everything was about to change. On the agricultural world of Kepler 442b Park, Min-Soo was loading grain containers onto transport ships when he first heard the tale. The human supervisor, Lee Dong-wook, pulled him aside during the meal break and spoke in the coded language that slaves develop when they need to share dangerous information. They say a boy on Nexus 7 snapped the neck of Commander Vex 9 with one, Punch Dong-wook whispered, while pretending to check the grain quality. They say he moved so fast, the aliens could not even see him coming. Min-soo had worked the grain farms for 8 years since he was 15 years old. Every day he watched Federation overseers beat human workers for minor infractions. Every night, he went to bed hungry because aliens took most of the food that humans grew. Every morning he woke up wondering if this would be the day they decided he was no longer useful enough to keep alive. The story seemed too good to be true, but something about it resonated in his chest. He had always felt anger burning inside him, but had learned to keep it hidden. The Federation taught humans that anger was dangerous and counterproductive. They said humans who could not control their emotions would be sent to punishment facilities where they would learn proper behavior. But what if anger was not something to be hidden? What if it was something to be used? That afternoon, the Kepler 442b farming complex received a new batch of alien supervisors. The transport ship landed in a cloud of dust and steam, disgorging a dozen reptilian creatures who immediately began shouting orders in their harsh native language. Among them was Sub-Commander Zelk 4, a smaller version of the same species as the dead Commander Vex 9. Zelk 4 had heard about the incident on Nexus 7 and was determined to show the human workers that such rebellion would not be tolerated. He selected Min-soo brother Kim Woo-jin as his first example. The 12-year-old boy had accidentally spilled a container of seeds while transferring them between storage units. The alien grabbed Woo-jin by the hair and lifted him off the ground. The child cried out in pain as Zelk 4 claws dug into his scalp, drawing thin lines of blood. All the human workers stopped what they were doing to watch, but none of them moved to help. They had learned that interfering with alien discipline only made things worse for everyone. "This is what happens to careless humans," Zelk 4 announced loudly. "This is why your species needs constant supervision. You are like children who must be taught proper behavior through pain." He raised his other hand to strike the crying boy across the face. But before the blow could land, someone grabbed his wrist and stopped it in midair. Zelk 4 turned to see Min-soo standing beside him with a grip like a mechanical clamp around the alien's arm. "Let my brother go," Min-soo said quietly. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it that made the alien supervisor pause. Something that reminded him of dangerous predators he had encountered on hostile worlds. "How dare you touch me?" Zelk 4 snarled. "I will have you executed for assaulting a Federation officer. Your entire family will be sent to the punishment facilities." But as he spoke, the alien noticed that his wrist was beginning to hurt. The human boy's grip was getting tighter and tighter until it felt like his bones might break. That should not have been possible. Humans were supposed to be physically weak compared to his species. Min-soo felt the same fire that Tae-ho had experienced starting to burn in his chest. Years of suppressed rage at watching his family suffer began transforming into something more powerful than simple anger. His muscles started growing denser and stronger. His reflexes became lightning fast. His vision became so clear that he could see every scale on the alien's terrified face. "I said, let my brother go," he repeated, and this time his voice carried the authority of someone who would not be refused. This time, Zelk 4 heard the sound of death in those simple words. The alien released Woo-jin immediately and tried to pull his wrist free from Min-soo's grip. But the human boy's fingers had become like steel cables. No amount of struggling could break them loose. Around them, the other human workers began to gather, forming a circle around the confrontation. For the first time in his life, Min-soo was not afraid of the consequences. He was not thinking about punishment facilities or execution squads. He was only thinking about 8 years of humiliation and abuse that his family had endured. 8 years of watching aliens treat humans like disposable tools. "You want to hit?" "Children," he asked Zelk 4, whose yellow eyes were now wide with panic. "You want to hurt people who cannot fight back. Let me show you what it feels like to face someone who can fight back." The transformation was happening faster for Min-soo than it had for Tae-ho. Perhaps because he had heard the story and knew what was possible. Perhaps because his anger had been building for so many years that it exploded all at once. Whatever the reason, his strength was growing by the second. He twisted Zelk 4's wrist until the bone snapped with a sound like breaking wood. The alien screamed and tried to strike Minsu with his free hand, but the human caught that wrist too. Now, the supervisor was completely helpless, held in a grip that was getting stronger every moment. The other alien overseers started reaching for their weapons, but the human workers moved to block them. For the first time in decades, humans outnumbered their oppressors and were no longer afraid to act on that advantage. Years of suppressed fury began bubbling to the surface in dozens of people at once. Minsu looked into Zelk 4's terrified eyes and smiled the same terrible smile that Taeho had shown Commander Vex 9. "You made the same mistake they all make," he said. "You assumed that because we seemed weak, we actually were weak. You never asked what would happen if we decided to stop pretending." What happened next was recorded by the farming complex's security cameras. The footage would later be studied by Federation analysts who could not understand how human physiology could accomplish what they were seeing. Minsu struck Zelk 4 once in the center of his chest, and the alien's reinforced ribcage collapsed like it was made of thin glass. The supervisor died instantly, his heart crushed by an impact that should not have been possible for a human to generate. His body fell to the ground in front of a dozen other alien overseers who suddenly realized they were vastly outnumbered by humans who were no longer acting like harmless slaves. The ripple effect was accelerating. Word of Minsu victory spread to other farming worlds within hours. On each world, humans who heard the story felt the same fire beginning to burn in their own chests. The same transformation that had turned a scared teenager into something capable of crushing Federation commanders was happening to ordinary people across human space. Lee So-young was welding hull plates on an orbital shipyard when she heard the news from Kepler 442b. Kim Dong-wook was maintaining atmospheric processors on a mining station when the story reached his ears. Choi Hannah was teaching human children in a Federation re-education center when another teacher whispered the impossible tale during recess. Each of them felt something change inside them when they learned what their fellow humans had accomplished. Each of them began to realize that the Federation had been lying about human weakness for so long that they had started believing their own propaganda. Each of them began to understand that the galaxy was about to learn what humanity was truly capable of when pushed beyond all reasonable limits. The age of human slavery was ending one awakened human at a time, and the Federation was completely unprepared for what was coming next. The emergency session of the Galactic Federation Council convened on Zentari Prime exactly 18 hours after the first reports of human uprising began flooding in from across the galaxy. The massive council chamber that had seen the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations was filled with panicked representatives from dozens of alien species. Supreme Chancellor Kix 9 slithered to his position at the center of the chamber, his tentacles writhing with barely controlled anxiety. Around him sat the most powerful beings in known space, military commanders who had conquered entire star systems, scientists who had unlocked the secrets of faster-than-light travel economists who controlled the flow of resources between 1,000,000 worlds. All of them were afraid of human teenagers. The holographic displays floating above the chamber showed incident reports from across Federation space. On Nexus 7, Commander Vex 9 had been killed by a 17-year-old mining worker. On Kepler 442b, Sub-Commander Zelk 4 had been crushed by a farmer barely out of his teens. Similar reports were coming in from industrial worlds, agricultural colonies, orbital installations, and research stations. Everywhere humans were housed, something impossible was happening. Ordinary workers who had been docile slaves for years were suddenly displaying physical capabilities that defied everything Federation science knew about human biology. They were moving faster than alien reflexes could track. They were generating striking force that could shatter advanced armor plating. They were shrugging off energy weapons that should have vaporized organic tissue. General Thox 12 activated his presentation controls with one of his 4 arms. The reptilian military commander had spent 3 decades studying human behavior and physiology. His reports had always concluded that humans were physically inferior to virtually every other sentient species in the galaxy. Now those reports were being proven catastrophically wrong. Our preliminary analysis indicates that approximately 12% of the human population is capable of this transformation, he announced to the shocked council. When exposed to sufficient stress or emotional trauma, they undergo rapid physiological changes that dramatically enhance their combat capabilities. The holographic displays showed medical scans of captured awakened humans. Their bone density had increased by over 300%. Their muscle fiber efficiency had improved by factors that should have been biologically impossible. Their nervous system response times had dropped to levels that matched advanced cybernetic implants. How is this possible? Demanded Trade Minister Vix III, whose species had been profiting from human labor for over 2 centuries. Our scientists have studied human genetics extensively. There are no sequences in their DNA that could account for such dramatic physical enhancement. General Thox 12 tentacles coiled nervously around his control interface. That is where our analysis becomes problematic, he admitted. These transformations appear to be triggered by psychological factors rather than purely biological ones. Human anger, fear, and protective instincts seem to unlock genetic potential that remained hidden until activated by extreme circumstances. The implications were staggering. The Federation had built its entire economic system around the assumption that humans were a docile labor species. Billions of humans worked in mines farms, factories, and service industries across Federation space. If even a small percentage of them could undergo this transformation, the consequences would be catastrophic. We must implement immediate containment protocols, Supreme Chancellor Kix 9 declared. All human workers will be placed under enhanced security, surveillance. Any signs of unusual behavior or emotional instability will result in immediate termination. But before the order could be transmitted, new reports began flooding in from Federation outposts across the galaxy. The situation was already spiraling beyond any hope of containment. On the mining world of Tau Cygni, human workers had overwhelmed their alien guards and seized control of the primary extraction facility. On the agricultural planet of New Osaka, human farmers had destroyed 3 battalions of Federation security forces using nothing but hand tools and improvised weapons. On the orbital shipyard at Wolf 359, human engineers had taken control of an entire fleet of warships. Each incident followed the same pattern. Humans who had been beaten down and demoralized for years suddenly discovered they possessed the ability to fight back. Once awakened, they moved with coordinated precision that suggested some form of species-wide communication network that Federation intelligence had never detected. The transformation was spreading like wildfire, jumping from world to world faster. Then Federation forces could respond. Worse yet, the awakened humans were not simply running away or hiding. They were actively hunting down Federation personnel and facilities. They were displaying tactical intelligence and strategic thinking that contradicted every psychological profile the Federation had ever compiled. We need to understand what we are dealing with. Chancellor Kix 9 decided. Deploy our best research teams to capture specimens of these awakened humans. Find out exactly how their transformation works and discover methods to prevent or reverse it. Admiral Zex 5 raised one of his chitinous arms to request permission to speak. The insectoid military leader controlled the Federation's most advanced combat fleets and had never lost a battle in his 40-year career. My lord, I respectfully suggest that research may be less important than immediate military action. The holographic displays shifted to show fleet positions throughout human space. Red indicators marked worlds where human uprisings were in progress. The pattern was expanding outward from the initial incidents like ripples on a pond. If we allow this rebellion to continue spreading, we risk losing control of entire sectors. Admiral Zex 5 continued. I recommend we implement Protocol 7 immediately. Complete sterilization of all infected worlds before the contagion can spread further. Protocol 7 was the Federation's ultimate weapon against rebellious populations. Orbital bombardment that would reduce entire planets to molten slag, ensuring that no trace of resistance could survive. It had been used successfully against 3 other species that had challenged Federation authority. But Supreme Chancellor Kix-9 hesitated before giving the order. Human colonies produced 60% of the rare minerals that powered Federation starships. Human workers maintained the agricultural systems that fed half the galaxy. Human technicians operated the manufacturing facilities that produced everything, from personal electronics to military equipment. Destroying the human population would cripple the Federation economy and leave dozens of critical industries without skilled workers. It would take decades to find replacement labor forces and retrain them to maintain current production levels. While the Council debated the wisdom of genocide, more reports continued arriving. On Earth itself, the human Homeworld Federation garrison, commanders were requesting immediate reinforcement. Local human populations had somehow learned about the uprisings on distant worlds and were beginning to show signs of the same transformation. The situation reached a tipping point when Admiral Zek's 5-own flagship sent a distress signal from the Proxima Centauri system. The crew reported that human maintenance workers aboard the vessel had suddenly turned violent and overwhelmed the alien command staff. The ship was now under human control and heading toward Earth at maximum speed. In the space of less than 24 hours, the Federation had lost military bases, industrial facilities, agricultural worlds, mining operations, and now one of their most advanced warships. The humans who had seemed like harmless laborers just yesterday were proving capable of coordinating complex military operations across interstellar distances. Supreme Chancellor Kix-9 realized that Protocol 7 would no longer be sufficient. The human uprising had already spread too far and grown too organized for simple planetary bombardment to contain it. They were facing something that no galactic civilization had encountered in recorded history. They were facing a species that had been pretending to be weak while secretly developing the ability to challenge the strongest military forces in known space. And now that the pretense was over, the Federation was about to learn why humans had always been the most dangerous creatures on their home planet. The age of human slavery was ending, and the age of human dominance was about to begin. 6 months after Kang Tae-ho crushed Commander Vex-9's skull in a mining tunnel on Nexus 7, the galaxy had transformed into something unrecognizable. The Galactic Federation that had ruled for over 3,000 years was crumbling as human uprisings spread to every corner of known space. Tae-ho now stood on the command deck of the Federation dreadnought, Cosmic Dominator, which had been captured by awakened humans during the Battle of Vega Prime. The massive starship was one of dozens that now flew under human command, crewed by former slaves who had discovered they possessed an intuitive understanding of advanced technology. Through the viewports, he could see the blue and white marble that was Earth hanging in the void of space. Humanity homeworld was free for the first time in over 2 centuries. The last Federation garrison had surrendered 3 weeks ago when they realized they were facing an entire planet of humans who were no longer afraid to fight. The transformation had spread far beyond what anyone had imagined possible. Scientists later estimated that nearly 30% of the human population could undergo the awakening process under the right circumstances. When word spread that rebellion was possible, millions of humans across the galaxy felt the same fire that had burned in Tae-ho's chest. Park Min-soo entered the command deck carrying a data tablet filled with status reports from human-controlled territories. He had grown from a farm worker into Tae-ho's most trusted lieutenant coordinating military operations across dozens of star systems. The Kepler sector is completely under our control, he reported. The last Federation outpost on Kepler 186F surrendered this morning. Admiral Chen wants to know if we should accept their terms or continue the assault. Tae-ho considered the question while studying the tactical displays that showed the current state of the war. Green indicators marked human-controlled worlds. Red showed remaining Federation strongholds. Yellow represented contested systems where fighting was still ongoing. Accept their surrender, he decided. But make it clear that any Federation personnel who remain in human space do so as guests, not as rulers. The age of alien overlords is over. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy as awakened humans took control of worlds that had been ruled by alien species for generations. But the revolution was about more than just military conquest. Humans were proving that they possessed capabilities that went far beyond physical strength and combat prowess. On the industrial world of Titan VII, human engineers were redesigning manufacturing systems to be more efficient and less wasteful. On the agricultural colonies of the Centauri cluster, human farmers were developing new techniques that increased crop yields while reducing environmental damage. On research stations throughout Federation space, human scientists were making breakthrough, discoveries that had eluded alien researchers for decades. It seemed that suppressing humanity had also suppressed their natural creativity and problem-solving abilities. Once freed from the constant fear and degradation of slavery, humans began demonstrating intellectual capabilities that matched or exceeded those of species that had considered themselves superior. The communication console chimed with an incoming transmission from the Federation capital on Centauri Prime. Tejo accepted the signal, and Supreme Chancellor Kix 9 appeared on the main screen, his tentacles writhing with barely contained desperation. "I wish to negotiate," the Chancellor announced. Without preamble, "The Federation Council is prepared to offer humanity equal status within our government structure. Full citizenship rights, shared representation in all major decisions." Tejo smiled the same cold smile he had given Commander Vex 9 in those final moments. "Equal status," he repeated as if tasting the words. "You want to make us partners in the same system that kept us as slaves for centuries." The Chancellor's tentacles twisted more frantically. "The situation has changed," he admitted. "We recognize that our previous policies toward humanity were misguided. We are prepared to make amends and establish a new relationship based on mutual respect." Behind the Chancellor, Tejo could see other Federation leaders watching the negotiation with anxious expressions. These were beings who had never experienced defeat in their entire lives. Species